where's the evidence that this nutrient is going to work? How was the nutrient that was in that study extracted? Is that what I'm using when I give it to a patient? I see a much greater movement of the value of evidence-based natural formulations and dietary supplements and extractions being included in how doctors and other healthcare providers manage their patients.
It took me about 5 years to get well where the lights permanently stayed on. It's like I can think, I can talk to people again. You know, I went from 220 down to 160 pounds. I was lean, I was able to get married. All my dreams came back. It was my moral obligation to continue that journey and to now provide solutions to the world.
This is the first time in human history kids are dying before their parents, or even before their grandparents. Studies show now the use of antibiotics will be associated with obesity later, or even develop early cancer. And they're also getting conditions that only elderly used to get. Coronary artery disease, diabetes, arthritis. But we're seeing them now in children, teens, and people in their 20s.
It becomes one prescription after another prescription, and we're only patching the problems and not addressing the reason for the symptoms, which is our body trying to tell us something. Sadly, oftentimes it's antidepressants, it's birth control pills, it's synthetic hormones. It's a challenge for women.
Welcome to episode 8 of Supplements Revealed. Wow, here we are, episode 8. I am so proud of you to make it this far into the series. You now know a lot more than you did when we started way back when in episode 1. Almost seems like another era of our life, doesn't it? What a journey, what great content, and it continues to deliver. Episode 8 has phenomenal information for you that can have massive and immediate impact on your life. Let me remind you before we jump in. Owning Supplements Revealed is something I want to encourage you to do. The prices will never be lower than they are right now. We have amazing discounts during this free viewing period. Now remember, we're in episode 8 of 9, okay? So we're getting to the end now. But I want you to take advantage of what we have to offer. Not only can you get all the content and videos and episodes that you've been seeing all along the way here, but in addition, we have some really radical bonuses, things that are going to deliver additional value to you in extraordinary ways. So there are multiple packages. We try to set them up for different types of people. So find the one that's right for you, enjoy these steep discounts, and own Supplements Revealed so you can continue to enjoy this information and have it make your life better. So here we are, we're in episode 8. Great interviews here. Looking forward to sharing them with you right now. Next up, we have clinical pharmacist James Lavelle, and he's a bit of a legend because he serves high-performance athletes, celebrity athletes. Phenomenal knowledge and expertise about human beings, how they function, what supplementation can do for them, not only to help them heal, but help them perform on a higher level. This man has written over 20 books, has an amazing range of experience and expertise, so tune in and learn a lot. So Jim, thanks for being here with us and taking the time. You have a really well-known name in the health and supplement field with a distinguished career, so tell me about how you got here.
Well, it's interesting. I got an early start in really valuing natural therapies when I went through pharmacy school. So I'm a clinical pharmacist. I'm boarded in clinical nutrition. I've studied other facets of natural therapies. Mm-hmm. But even through my college days, I went to the University of Cincinnati College of Pharmacy, which was founded by John Uri Lloyd, who was one of the earliest botanical extractors. And so literally the foundations of the pharmacy school that I went to was rooted in natural therapies. And we had pharmacognosy courses, so the study of plant medicine and organic medicinal biochemistry. It really mattered to start thinking about things like amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. And I took that as a natural extension out in my career. And so over the last 35 years, I engaged in writing 4 databases on natural therapies, herb-drug interactions, drug-induced nutrient depletions, as well as educating now some 4,000 physicians a year on how to incorporate the use of dietary supplements and natural therapies into their regimens to really help people attain the vitality and the health that they're looking for, because it's a bigger and bigger challenge today.
Are you seeing a movement with medical doctors who are starting to fill in the gaps with nutritional supplements as a part of their medical practice?
Yeah, I think it's like anything that is new. It takes time to gain acceptance. I think with the nutrition industry, there's some challenges because you have everything from what I was taught, actually, vitamins make expensive urine,
Right.
to, oh, it's a miracle. It can fix everything. And then the truth is somewhere in between. So getting physicians and other healthcare providers like pharmacists and dietitians and nurse practitioners and chiropractors and naturopaths on board means teaching them a good clinical base. Where's the evidence that this nutrient is going to work? How was the nutrient that was in that study extracted? Is that what I'm using when I give it to a patient? But I really do believe that in general, all of healthcare is moving towards the value of lifestyle, dietary supplements, nutrients, obviously trying to recommend things like exercise and behavior management for stress. But I see a much greater movement of the value of evidence-based natural formulations and dietary supplements and extractions being included in how doctors and other healthcare providers manage their patients. I mean, I'm directing the Institute for Hall of Fame Life at the NFL Hall of Fame Village, which is a billion-dollar retirement village and entertainment complex, and we're doing integrative care there. And the reason they came to me was the successes we had had with athletes incorporating these kind of strategies into a platform of getting them to not just feel recovered, but to begin to reach and feel the best you can. And I think that's what's important about dietary supplements, is I think it gives you that extra edge to individuate what you need as an individual.
I don't think I know a single pro athlete that doesn't supplement. When you talk about the great results that you're seeing with athletes, what are some of the things that you're doing with them?
Oh, sure. And even with working with special forces, right? Any of the high physical performance and achievement oriented, careers, you can make a huge difference. So for example, the harder an athlete trains, the more stress they put on their body. I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
Now that means they may need to eat right, but the reality is you may not be able to get all the nutrients you need from your diet if you're training 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day, or maybe you're involved in more of a high collision sport where you're sore, you're aching, your muscles are tender, and you may need to augment your body's ability to heal. And you can do that with the use of dietary supplements. One of my favorite is just using agents that help support the nervous system. So everybody knows reaction time is important.
Yes.
And one of my favorite things to do is give an athlete something like alpha GPC, alpha glycerol phosphatidylcholine. Actually, in studies in Italy, they showed even not just in athletes, but dementia patients got memory improvement when they took alpha GPC. So it's neuroprotective, but even more importantly is it can improve reaction time. So whether I'm talking to a hockey player, an NHL player, and they start to tell me, I know I'm supposed to get to that puck, but it just doesn't seem like I make that decision quite as quick. Or, for example, when we worked with Corvette Race Team when they went to Le Mans, and I know I was supposed to turn that wheel going into turn 4 at 180 miles an hour at 2 in the morning, but my body didn't respond to my brain quick enough. You can actually nourish your nervous system to restore an optimal nervous system response if you rely on reaction time. So that's a pretty big deal.
Right. Now,
the other things that are important are, can I help someone to feel less achy and sore and not have to resort to more powerful drugs? As we well know, it's no secret. using nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for a long period of time affect gut health and affect the kidneys. And so can I get by on less of that? Could I get by and maybe help manage pain for someone where they don't have to go down the route of opioids or some of the kind of the travesties of modern pain management care by doing better prevention? And you had mentioned chiropractic care, physical medicine, whether it was massage or myofascial release. You have all these different modalities that you can apply to a player. And the beauty of it is, it's great that they get to perform better, right? We all want athletes to perform better. What I really love about it is the player gets to enjoy a healthier career. And after their career, they have a much healthier metabolic reserve because we've worked with them, whether it's with the physical side, meaning the physical medicine side, whether it's by managing their diet and creating a diet that's correct for them, or applying the right nutrients that help minimize the risks associated with training really hard for extended periods of time.
I often see people who are not athletes, as a matter of fact, they're sedentary, but then they see what athletes are taking and say, oh, that's the one for me. So in those particular circumstances, what's your approach?
Yeah, I mean, most of my career, I deal with the everyday person who's dealing with, I'm tired, I'm foggy-headed, I ache, I'm overweight, I'm not sleeping well, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. I just don't have enough energy to get through my day. You got to help me, right?
Right.
And I think the first thing I try to do with people is understand that in general, people eat too much, they eat too often, they pick the wrong things, they eat at the wrong time of day, and then they don't move enough and they don't sleep enough. So that's number one. We got to get some lifestyle guidance into an individual to help them make better choices so that it gives their body the ability to heal and the ability to maximize their performance. But a lot of people can benefit from, say, for example, curcumin, right? A scientifically extracted curcumin that has great data behind it would even show that it's equally effective as an NSAID or a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug for managing chronic and simple pain with a lot less side effect profile. So there's a lot of strategies that people can do to improve their quality of life. When people ask me that, I always start with, look, there's no magic bullets. I think it's one of the big misnomers. We've looked for drugs to be our magic bullet. I'm telling you as a clinical pharmacist, and I taught at the College of Pharmacy for 17 years, there are no magic bullets. It's great when people get sick and we can heroically bring them away from that illness, whether it's an infection or they need surgery. But for the day in and day out function that you have, layering lifestyle and now adding what I call, and I'm an advocate, how could I not be when you've written 20 books in natural therapies and 4 databases? I'm obviously slanted, but I believe that adding natural therapies, both physical modalities, but then the beauty of some natural dietary supplements, botanicals, amino acids, nutraceuticals that are targeted to fit what you need can have tremendous impact.
So you mentioned this term heroic medicine, but if we look at the past, there was a time when medicine gave mercury, and then if that didn't work, they would bleed people. And when that didn't work, maybe they would bleed them even more until they died. And at the same time, you had these women who had this wisdom and knowledge around herbs and how herbs can heal, and it would be passed down through generations, but every 100 years or so, they became so effective, they ended up burning them at the stake for being witches. So I think in a sense, the nutrition industry suffers from this. It's a challenge that they face. In many respects, we're still looking for a silver bullet, but when you're utilizing supplements, it takes a while for the body to utilize them and make a change. So how do we get patients to understand that?
It's interesting. I find that I can actually affect change pretty quick. We did a program with a major fitness chain where we evaluated them, and we actually created a rubric where they could answer a questionnaire and they could have some lab values done, and we'd look at their biometrics, and it would point to where their metabolism was broke. So where is your metabolic roadblock? And then take things that are appropriate for that. So 240,000 people went through that program. We had about a 93% completion rate. And I think it's because the results were targeted. I think what we suffer from is everybody needs to take a multivitamin, a probiotic, fish oil, and a vitamin D.
Right.
And by the time you get to that, you start to get weary on how many things you're going to take. Now, I'm not here to say that taking any of those is wrong. I just mean that what I've always done and why I think why I've had such a large client base and teaching physicians, I really help them to understand this. It's really important to pick things that are going to change someone's life. They need to feel better. And you can get that with natural therapies. We need to do a better job of collecting that data as an industry. It's a little bit hard because with a drug, you're giving one drug and you're looking for one output. When you're looking at natural therapies, you have even one plant compound has 100 ingredients in it because it's a plant medicine. And then I'm changing your diet, teaching you how to breathe deep, getting you to sleep better. And then I'm giving you probably 4 or 5 things because, by the way, just vitamins and minerals alone, we have 23 essential nutrients that are needed. So it gets a little more complex, more like a black box where we have to measure the total positive output that is occurring in a person as they create a lifestyle change that's inclusive of using dietary supplements. Because there's plenty of studies that show a single dietary supplement having a positive benefit. And there's meta-analysis even. For example, just probiotics. There's 2018 meta-analysis showing that it has benefit for people's gastrointestinal tract. So the data's there, but the reality of how it gets used in the real world, people are using several things at one time. We need to be able to target what that means for individuals. And you mentioned, since the beginning of time, in every traditional history, whether it's Chinese medicine, Native American, Tibetan medicine, the early naturopaths of North America, I don't care what culture you look at, the most valuable herb in every culture is the herb that worked on reducing the person's response to stress. So the adaptogens were the most highly valued herbs. And I think that's interesting because you know what we've lost today? We don't give people any kind of way of really being resilient to stress. We let that stress erode them, erode them down to that soul level where all of a sudden one day they go, I need an anti-anxiety drug or I need an antidepressant because I've just hit the wall.
Right.
But in traditional cultures, they would give you certain nutrients that would keep you more resilient and strong. And I think sometimes we've got to look back and understand those types of phenomena. Because I know for me, the biggest thing I do is I teach people how to become more resilient to stress, either through lifestyle or what nutrients they need to take.
So let's talk about these adaptogens. Tell me about some specific adaptogens and what they're for.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting adaptogens and some of my favorite agents that respond for stress. But a lot of people have heard of ashwagandha, for example. Ashwagandha is an Indian compound, and it's known as Indian ginseng, but it's ashwagandha. We call ginseng the herb of stress response in all these cultures, right?
Yeah.
So ashwagandha actually has quite a few studies behind it in humans. Once again, I have no mice come to me. I've yet to have a mouse walk into my office and say, "Hey, could you fix my tail?" It's not happening. So I really like looking at big human trials, and ashwagandha is one of those herbs that have been studied. Actually, they standardize ashwagandha to withanolide, so they standardize it to a chemical in that herb that shows you the quality of the material. And then they study how much of that material do I give you and what effect does it have? And ashwagandha has shown improved concentration, better resiliency, better energy, helps with thyroid function in individuals, mental clarity. And there's been very elegant studies on ashwagandha. So that's one. Another botanical I like a lot, and it's kind of the new era of botanical medicine. There's an herb that's trademarked named Relora. Well, Relora is the combination of magnolia and philodendron. And what they did was they looked at the activities of both, and when they extracted it, they kind of took the best features of both, put them together into a capsule, and they give it to you. And now Relora has clinical studies showing that it reduces stress-induced eating patterns. So that you could take Relora, feel more calm, and not succumb to reward eating, or I want some comfort food. And I got to tell you, I have a lot of people that I work with on a day in and day out basis, and one of their biggest challenges, by the time I hit 5 o'clock, I cannot stop craving something either sweet or salty or both.
Yeah.
So they're looking for that chocolate covered pretzel, right? And so I think Relora is an interesting new way of looking at botanical medicines, where we combine kind of the new science of extraction, and we look at the wisdom of how these plants were used in the past and start to combine the efforts of those plants and create a combination that's really effective. And then there's some of the standbys like Manchurian ginseng, which has been used for generations to help people with their endurance and their stamina. And probably my favorite is a Russian adaptogen called rhodiola, Rhodiola rosea. And rhodiola actually is one of the adaptogens they've actually shown. You can take it, and on the first dose, within 30 minutes, you actually get a change in your physical performance ability. That's pretty outstanding. And so rhodiola has been shown to improve mental focus, to downregulate your nervous system so you're not so what's called sympathetic dominant, not so fight or flight. So it keeps your nervous system more intact. Kind of goes back to what I was talking about when I'm working with athletes and trying to keep their nervous system from basically overheating, making them less able to have reaction time. Rhodiola helps you under duress keep that reaction time and nervous system playing out a chord of balance, so that you're able to optimize your function when you're under either tough, psychogenic events, I've got to really think hard for extended periods of time, or a tough physical event.
These sound great. As you're working with someone, is this the best way for them to navigate through what they need to do to maximize their life and energy? Do they need to find a professional? Do they navigate through Google? What is the best way?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to just read and try to figure out what's the best thing for you. I know there's a lot of blogging experts and biohacking experts, and I have to be honest, I've spent almost 40 years of my life now studying pharmacology and specializing in natural products and giving them to patients and designing programs and teaching physicians how to do it. And I have to be honest, sometimes the information that I see is very short-sighted. It's not understanding how it plays out into the individual over the wholeness of their well-being, right? And so I think be careful about what you read and implement. Double check your facts. One of the things that we've been working on over the last 6 years is a bioinformatics piece where you can take a questionnaire. If you have a lab test, you can get a simple lab test done, look at your biometrics, and it'll point for you where you need to go. And so consumers could actually go online and they can take that questionnaire. They can sign up to get a lab test because patients do have a right to go get a lab test. And as long as something doesn't come up where there's an illness involved, right? You don't uncover something where the lab director has to call, right? There's a lot you can do for yourself. I kind of like that as a first step for folks, because I'm really about getting people to be self-empowered with their health. I can want them to be healthy, but empowering them to make the steps gives them the pride of ownership when something happens that betters their life. Hey, I feel better. I lost weight. I don't ache as much. You got to have an active participant in the program. Good example of that's these guys. If I measure my heart rate, quantified self-movement, that's one thing. What I really want is quantified health. What do I do with that number when I get it? What's it matter whether my heart rate's at 72 versus 62 in the morning when I get up? I think these are the key things that people could really change the shape of their life if they were to just start understanding that you have power over your weight, you have power over your blood pressure, you have power over your blood sugar, you have power over your heart rate. But it takes an effort in order to kind of get to that spot.
If somebody wants to access the program that you worked on, is that available online?
Yeah, one way they can get to it, it's really quick and easy, is just go to jimlaval.com. I provide a lot of information to individuals just because I think it's a service. So whether people want to learn how to count their carbs, or they want to learn about how to eat a modified low-carb diet, or what's the truth about a ketogenic diet, they can go get all that information. There's no requirements to it. I do it as a service because I talk and teach to so many healthcare professionals. So there's a lot that people can get just by going to jimlavelle.com. And if they want to do that test, there's a place for them to be able to do that.
That's great. Let's keep talking about some of the specifics. We should probably tie up on stress a little bit. You mentioned breathing a couple of times. What do you teach people about breathing?
For me, I think one of the most important things people can do is learn how to breathe. We all think, wow, that sounds really simple. But what we know now is the more stress you get under and the more what's called sympathetic tone, the white tiger's chasing you, basically what happens is your brain tells your vagus nerve. So you hear the term vagal tone or loss of vagal tone and loss of heart rate variability, meaning that your heart loses its flexibility to adapt to stress and your blood vessels don't adapt to the stress anymore. And then what starts to happen is that your diaphragm, that vagal tonicity is lost and your diaphragm starts to pull up. And now all of a sudden your rib cage is more constricted and you're breathing shallow. You're making more lactic acid. And it's really interesting. The more lactic acid and the less oxygen you get into your tissues, the more anxious you get. So it becomes a vicious, perpetual cycle. So the yogis had it right, teaching people how to breathe deep. I teach a simple technique for people because a lot of times people don't have time to go to yoga class. I wish they did. I wish everybody could embrace their lifestyle and have enough time in their day to balance that out. But I also have to be a realist. I have an executive working a 12-hour day with a company that they're responsible for 500 lives and their employees. So I teach a simple box breathing technique. No hyperventilation, nothing too hardcore to do, but to inhale on a 4 count, hold a 4 count, exhale on a 4 count, hold on a 4 count. So you're basically inhale, hold, exhale, hold.
Right.
Do that for 3 to 4 minutes a couple times a day. And it can have an unbelievable effect on your nervous system. And in fact, what people say is, my God, I just took a deep breath. I didn't even realize it. When you do this with individuals, it's an autonomic response where all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I just took a deep breath. I didn't realize where that came from. Now, you could use an app, right? I love it now that watches tell us when it's time to breathe. Or you could get an app and download it and get very technical. Put on an earplug, watch your heart rate variability, measure the zones of your heart rate, and you can even go to that extent. The key to it is, I think, for us living in a very fast-paced modern world, just try to do it 4 minutes, 3 times a day, and it could really make a difference on resetting that nervous system. And once again, I want the recommendations I make to work for people. If I can't get that nervous system to calm down, it's a lot harder to get things to work for them.
Right.
So whether it's sleeping, managing their stress during the middle of their workday, breathing deep is good. Taking things like Relora or theanine or holy basil, or ashwagandha, all can be beneficial to help manage people in their chronic, stressful lives. But it really has to begin to become a lifestyle.
So do you have any recommendations for people who are struggling with blood sugar for one reason or another?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My grandmother was a fingerless, toeless, blind diabetic. My father, who lives with me at age 89, has been a diabetic now for 40 plus years. And I've written textbooks on diabetes. And so, it's one of the biggest issues we have today in our society. 50% of the U.S. population and adults are either pre-diabetic, 38%, or diabetic, 12%. So 1 out of every 2 people in our country is either already diabetic or on their way to being a diabetic. And a person with diabetes is way more predisposed to the 8 most common forms of cancer. So once you become diabetic, a bunch of other metabolic problems happen. You get heart disease, you get kidney disease, non-traumatic blindness, increased cancer risk. This is a big deal. So a couple things. One is you have to move. You really do have to move. Try to walk 30 minutes after your evening meal if you can. If you can't walk 30 minutes after your evening meal, walk 20 minutes after your evening meal. Get something. Walk 10. Start somewhere. You got to get that exercise component in. The other piece, of course, is there's some great evidence for dietary supplements. So this is data right from the National Institute of Health. So the NIH has repeatedly published that low magnesium status is the number one nutrient deficiency that is directly associated with the development of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. And we're not getting enough magnesium in our diet these days. People aren't eating a lot of greens that are maybe organically grown in rich soil that are mineral rich. They're not even eating greens for that matter. They're not, eating a lot of nuts because of nut allergies. So nuts are rich, dark greens are rich, pumpkin seeds are rich, but who's going to eat a quarter pound of pumpkin seeds every day, right? You get burned out on it. So I think one of the more important dietary supplements as it relates to diabetes, get on magnesium. I mean, that's really important. And chromium is another trace mineral that has multiple studies on it showing that it helps with blood sugar regulation. Now, it's great if you take these nutrients, and there's actually some really interesting studies on botanicals as well. It's great if you take them, but you still have to start to become responsible about how you're eating. Because when you think of it, for most people who develop diabetes, and now there's lifestyle factors and environmental factors and some genetics involved as well, but for the most part, most people will end up developing diabetes because they eat too much, they eat too often, they pick the wrong foods, they don't move around enough, they're under a lot of stress, and they don't get enough sleep. Because sleep raises your blood sugar. So a lot of people don't realize that if you don't get enough sleep, I'm just limiting it because I'm a very busy guy. I'm only going to get 5 hours. When you do that, you're actually increasing your blood sugar. When stress hormones are high in you, so when your cortisol elevates, it raises your blood sugar. And then when you eat foods that are high and it's not just refined sugars, people go, well, I'm going to eat whole grain cookies. They're still cookies, guys, right? They're still cookies. So you still have to be responsible about the type of food you're eating, not too much sugar, not too much starch, healthy fats, lean proteins, lots of vegetables. These are just the hallmark things people should attempt to do in order to improve their blood sugar. And it gets popular now.
Right.
People go, I'm going to go to a ketogenic diet. Well, the issue with ketogenic diet is people can't sustain it very long. They typically can only go 40 to 60 days, and then they start puckering out on it. And once you start to maybe eat a fairly high-fat diet, but then add carbs in with it, well, now you're not doing a ketogenic diet, and that's a pretty damaging diet. So it's very interesting for people that are worried about their diabetes. Please make sure you know your magnesium level, and you go after taking some magnesium. You get in some chromium, take that walk, manage that stress, try to get to sleep, make more responsible selections, and you can really put a big dent in this epidemic.
You mentioned magnesium. Is one magnesium the same as the other, the kind of magnesium you could buy, for example, at Walmart?
That's a great question is, what kind of magnesium? So, magnesium gets attached to different kinds of salts. And so you'll see magnesium chloride, magnesium gluconate, magnesium oxide, magnesium glycinate. It's dizzying, right? So if I just tell somebody, go get a bottle of magnesium, you go to the store and what a consumer ends up doing is going, well, which one's cheapest? And that might not be the one that absorbs the best. So the best magnesiums, magnesium glycinate, for example, it's an amino acid chelate that has the best data behind it for repleting your body, or in other words, absorbing to your body and getting into your tissues, magnesium glycinate. Magnesium taurate, which is another amino acid attached to that magnesium. A lot of times healthcare providers will use that if you're interested in cardiovascular health because the taurine really helps. You can get magnesium malate, really good for your muscles. It helps to get rid of the lactic acid in your muscles if you exercise a lot. You'll hear of magnesium citrate. Great product, but the problem with magnesium citrate is it can make your bowels a little bit loose. So if you go to try to take a little more extra magnesium citrate, you may end up with a loose stool. And so I really like the glycinates, taurates, malates, because they have a proven track record for absorption. They have specifics for how they affect your body. And I can rely on them to get clinically desired endpoints. People feel better. It's interesting when one of the series of books I wrote on were drug-induced nutrient depletions, and we wrote databases on them as well. And so when people take certain drugs that deplete magnesium, for example, hydrochlorothiazide is used to manage blood pressure in people who are early hypertensives. It depletes magnesium, potassium, and coenzyme Q10. When I look at the side effects of hydrochlorothiazide, muscle cramps, muscle spasms, headaches, lack of energy, it's the exact same side effect profile of what happens when you're deficient in magnesium. So there's even this aspect of understanding that if you're on a drug and it's depleting nutrients and you're having a side effect, it could well be just because those nutrients are depleted, they're actually the symptoms that you're experiencing. So magnesium is one of the most important ones that you need to watch for.
Staying on that vein, are there other common depletions caused by drugs that people should be looking out for?
Well, yeah, there's a big movement in this. We've been talking about this for 25 years. So there's two aspects. There's the drug-induced nutrient depletion, say proton pump inhibitors, antacids. Deplete protein, magnesium, vitamin D, B12, all right? That's pretty bad, right? Because when you lose your magnesium, you're increasing your risk of being a person with diabetes. You're losing energy. Vitamin D is important for immune function and bone health. When you lose protein, you can't build muscle as well.
Yeah.
When you lose B12, you start to become anemic. And all of these things are things that have been proven in clinical studies. But because it's not a requirement for drug studies to report that you're depleting these vitamins or minerals, many times it doesn't show up till years later. So for example, a warning came out on proton pump inhibitors because it created bone loss to the point of osteoporosis in people. Because the vitamin D levels plummeted so bad on that drug that they could not absorb calcium or magnesium into the bone, and the magnesium was being excreted because of that, and people would lose bone. So, men who you wouldn't think would have bone loss, who were put on PPIs, would have bone loss. People on statin medications. So the cholesterol-lowering medications deplete coenzyme Q10, vitamin D, and carnitine, amongst some other things, selenium as well. Oral corticosteroids. So corticosteroids deplete a myriad of vitamins and minerals out of the body. B vitamins, vitamin C, CoQ10, magnesium, significant amount. Oral contraceptives in women. It depletes a significant amount of nutrients from the body. Even in a subset of women, it can deplete vitamin B6 so bad that it causes depression in them. And then they go to their doctor a year later after being on that oral contraceptive, and they're not looked at as a vitamin B6 deficiency. They're looked at as, you need an antidepressant like a Prozac or something along that line, or an Effexor, instead of let's fix the problem that occurred because you're on the medication. It doesn't mean you can't use the medication, but you should correct or create a counterbalance for the nutrients that were taken away by that drug that are causing symptoms or side effects in you. And I think it's important it gets missed. And the other one that we're compiling a brand new database, this is brand new, is drug-induced microbiome disruption. So everybody's talking about the microbiome nowadays. So when you take a drug, it can disrupt or destroy your microflora. And 25% of the drugs on the market today have been shown to create a disruption in your microflora, which of course is critical from everything from your immune system to how you absorb nutrients.
I'm so glad you covered that about oral contraceptives for women. Is there any other specific or generalized advice for women versus men when it comes to nutritional supplementation? Do you have any advice for women?
Oh, I think it's been so underserved about gender-specific medicine and what a woman's needs are versus a man's needs. For one, we have to realize that women are more sensitive to fight or flight. So we think men were, but they've proven with brain imaging that women are actually more sensitive to fight or flight. So they get stressed easier, and they're also more prone because that stress is more chronic now, right? We have a primitive nervous system in a modern world, right? So the modern world of stress is making us think it's always a white tiger when it's maybe just an email or a Facebook message that you didn't like, right?
Right.
And so first recognize that women may need to work a little more on their stress management and maybe even need an adaptogen a little bit more than a man initially. So I think that's important. B, that there are trace minerals like iron that they may need more of because during their menstruating years, it's hard for women a lot of times to get enough iron, and that can lead to kind of chronic, just borderline anemias.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for energy. And then the other piece is that because they're on oral contraceptives many times, that can start to throw off the gut microbiome, and that's been linked to autoimmunity. And women are more prone to autoimmunity than men. So there's a lot of factors that start to swirl in when we start to talk about, it's not just about the value of a vitamin, it's about the value of the culture of recognizing that vitamins are an important part of how we function. Mm-hmm. And it's a part of our metabolic milieu, right? It's a part of the glue that makes us express who we are. But now comes the task, whether it's a woman or a man, mm-hmm. What nutrients do you need? And how can you rely on them? Because I think it's one of the failures that we have currently is that we don't really do a good job of helping people understand the quality of a product. It could be good marketing that makes you think it's a quality product when really you could have an equally quality product or a cheaper product sitting right next to it that just doesn't have as good a marketing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big gap that we have. I don't think a lot of people even understand drug nutrient depletion yet, and we've been writing about it and publishing databases for hospitals to use for 25 years.
Let's stay on this for a second. When you're talking about how not being able to judge quality with your clients, how do you advise them on who they can trust and who they should be listening to?
This is probably one of the toughest questions I get asked. I mean, I get asked this a lot. I even have healthcare professionals coming to me who've been through all of our coursework that say, how do I know what I'm giving, right? They're not really sure.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, if you're looking at a sports athlete, you can at least look to something called NSF Sport certification, which means it's been looked at and is approved for sporting and is really looked at for any kind of impurities or performance-enhancing supplements or substances within it. Mm-hmm. So there's one ray of hope. I think that the good manufacturing practices that have been deployed in the U.S. over the last decade have really improved baseline product quality, looking for things like pesticide residues, toxic metals, bacterial counts, all those kind of things that are important to, I think, guarantee a safe product. Mm-hmm. Where it really gets a little tricky are the ingredients, right? Uh-huh. It's, am I getting this particular product from maybe a lower source manufacturer, from getting the actual material that was studied in the studies that everybody's quoting, right? So it's the old story of ginkgo isn't just ginkgo. There's certain fractions of ginkgo that are studied the way the plant was manufactured and processed, that when they gave it in the study, it worked. Mm-hmm. It's not the same as just going out and buying any old ginkgo. So I think that whether you talk to the supplier of who you're going to buy it from, or whether you have a healthcare provider who's providing it to you, they should be able to explain to you, what am I giving to you, mm-hmm. right? After all, you're ingesting it.
Right.
And if they can't explain what's in the bottle, I think you need to look somewhere else to either purchase your goods or find another healthcare provider that's really engaged in making sure they know what they're giving you.
What are the ABCs on how to get started and what you need? What are the basic approaches to getting started into a nutrition program?
So, one of the things you can do if you're wanting to get started, there's a lot of different ways. If you want to do it kind of the old school way, one of the books I wrote was Cracking the Metabolic Code. It's got a nice questionnaire on the back of it. And literally, if you answer the questionnaire, it'll help you pinpoint where you need to start. Now, in general, you have to be honest with yourself. If you're not eating a really pristine diet, buying organic, eating 7 servings of vegetables, 2 servings or 3 servings of fruit a day, mm-hmm. getting in some, maybe some legumes. Really, if you're not dialed in on your diet, I think people value the values in a good multivitamin and mineral. Try to find one that has amino acid chelated minerals, natural compounds like carotenoids instead of, say, synthetic beta-carotene, a natural carotenoid. So looking at nutrients that are maybe derived from either natural sources or chelates. Everybody says, take a fish oil. Yeah, I think there's a lot of variation on fish oil today. Mm-hmm. So you do want to kind of, read up on it a little bit and say, well, what am I looking for? Am I trying to lower my triglycerides? Am I just looking for general heart health? But you're not going to go too wrong by, taking a fish oil. I think people miss the boat on doing things like taking chia seed as fiber. Psyllium is fiber. And then what you really need to do is an inventory. What is it that's bothering me?
Yeah.
Do my joints hurt? Well, maybe a dietary supplement like glucosamine, it's been proven to help joints, could be a big help. Is it that my main focus is that I'm stressed out and I'm anxious? Well, I would worry about doing that before taking a multivitamin. I would want to learn how to control what's bothering me first. And I have to tell you, I mean, I've seen personally probably 70, 80,000 patients and directed hundreds of thousands of patients' intakes. In general, people complain of being overcommitted and anxious and tired, and they ache, and they don't feel like they're thinking as sharp as they should. They feel like they've gained weight, and they don't get enough sleep. So start by targeting one or two of those areas and look for a nutrient. Read up a little bit. What nutrient has the best evidence that you found and you read and it made sense to you that you should try that for one of those specific problems? Start by solving a problem to improve the quality of your life. Once you do that, I think you catch the bug a little bit and you start to get on that journey of searching for other people that'll help you, whether it's in physical medicine or in the biochemistry side, like I'm in.
Jim, this has been spectacular. So thank you for sharing your wisdom, your time, and your skill. Thanks very much.
You're absolutely welcome. It was great to be here.
That's one high horsepower brain that is committed to a career that's helping all of us. Hope you took a lot of great ideas away from that. Next up, we have a very compelling interview with Warren Phillips. It's an ironic story. Warren Phillips was a scientist whose job it was to detox the environment. A lot of horrible toxins in the environment, they have to be removed, and there's some science that's necessary to do that safely. Unfortunately for Warren, doing that work made him toxic himself inside his own body, which started him on the journey of understanding how to detox the cell. Not an easy thing to do. He became very sick, was searching for answers, applied his science and expertise to this subject for his own benefit because he needed it. He was desperate for it, as you'll see in the story. And what he found is something that can change your life. Watch my interview now with Warren Phillips. Thank you so much for being with us here, Warren. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I had this really interesting journey that landed me in the supplement industry, one I never thought I would be in. I had this dream of growing up and living in my little country home with my little family and hunting and fishing around my life, and that kind of all fell apart because once I moved out west, I went to University of Montana to get my graduate degree, and I'm like, wow, part of my dream and vision is to get a job back east and clean up the environment of toxic chemicals. I went to a liberal arts college, was big into helping the environment, cleaning the environment, and just getting a job. But life kind of took a turn, and I wound up getting very sick from cleaning up hazardous waste as an environmental consultant. I was a project manager. We cleaned up U.S. Forest Service, abandoned mines, Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Forest Service, also Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, just wind up getting involved in all these heavy metal abandoned mine cleanups. It was so fun though. I mean, I had a blast at the time. It was beautiful, elk bugling. You can just imagine a country boy like myself out in the woods cleaning up abandoned mines, but little did I know I was poisoning myself. And federal use defense sites, up in the middle of in old Indian reservations on the Montana-Canadian border, was just having a blast, having a lot of fun, but at the end, not really impacting the world like I thought I was. Because after getting toxic and sick, I got really kind of upset because you go through the medical system. I'm like, man, I just don't feel well. I'm getting more anxious. I'm getting these aches and pains. I'm starting to get weight gain. I used to love to be around people, but now I don't. I've become sound sensitive. The doorbell would ring and I'd get messed up. I used to invest into youth and would love my phone to ring to talk to and would invite people over to my home. Eventually, the phone ringing and people coming to my home became too much for me, to the point where I got so sick that I had to quit my environmental consulting job and move back home in with my parents at the age of 25, which is quite embarrassing. And lucky for me, I was able to sell a little bit, sell my home and have a little bit of income. But it really led into a series of debilitating symptoms that got me to the point where I was almost suicidal. I'm always transparent, even on film, is that I had a great faith in God that allowed me not to pull the trigger, if you will, because I had this feeling, as one of my friends told me, you're going to something, you're not running from something, when I left my beautiful dream house or in lifestyle in Montana as a hunting fishing boy with my master's degree in hand, and not be able to use my degree, being sick, living with my parents. It was quite embarrassing. But in it, I was able to explore other options. But at first, of course, I went even further. I mean, I was going to therapists and everything else back there. They say, you're fine, you need to exercise more and do some stress adaptation. But none of that seemed to work. So you go to the local, my parents go to your local, Evans City, 50 people live there, go to the local MD and ask him. And he's like, oh, just give you some Effexor, and that'll fix it. And but I'm a scientist, right? So I developed analytical methods. I did a lot. My master's work was in the binding of heavy metals and sulfides and sediments. We used activated silica beads to trap heavy metals. So everything that I did was about heavy metal cleanup in my master's work. It was actually published. I got going to and presenting at different places about our work and the science of it. So I had all this sciencey background of binding of heavy metals and doing those things in my master's work. But then when I was told by the medical doctor or asked him the question, how do these, what's the mechanism of action for these drugs? Well, they can help with, they're not really sure, I'm not really sure, but it seems to activate, some dopamine receptors, which may help elevate your mood and blah, 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 blah. And we found some research, this could help with your fibromyalgia and, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, interesting. Well, how long should I be on this? Well, first of all, I was on the medication for a month. It started giving me bad symptoms. I was constipated, not feeling well, feeling worse actually in some respects. And then of course, when he asked me, how are you feeling? I'm like, well, 1% better, literally 1% better. And his statement to me is, well, good, stay on that. For 1% better, I was told to stay on it. I said, how long? Should I stay on all the rest of your life? Why? Because most people are on 3 or 4 medications, you'd only be on 1. So you're doing fine. And my blood work was normal, of course, and all those things. So it was a very interesting, but for me, that became very frustrating because I wanted answers. There's got to be a cause. And back then, not like these films didn't exist. Supplements Revealed didn't exist. All the health influencers of today didn't exist. I mean, the market's more confusing today. That's why we're probably shooting this video, is to bring some clarity to the supplement industry. It's very, there's great players and there's not so great players. But in this instance, I got, pretty angry because I wanted answers and no one could give me answers. So I started looking on the internet, and it really didn't exist back in 2005. And the frustrating part is I couldn't find those answers. I was getting angry at the medical system, but that's what I believed in before. And the medical system, and I'm not ripping on the medical system, just let's make that clear, for this interview, is they weren't equipped to do the things that I needed to do to get my life back. So I had to go on that journey before the journey was easy. I was, pioneering some of these concepts, and I wasn't able to find the answers that I needed. So in the end, we met a mutual friend that we know, Dr. Pompa, and I was able to gain some access to some of this information because he was obviously in this field and pioneering some of these things. And I hooked up with him, and he started giving me supplements and doing some things. And I'm like, these are the first things that actually, these alternative methods were the first things that start making me feel better. Mm-hmm. And I was very skeptic at the time. And he's like, well, you need to do a heavy metals test kit. You're super toxic from what you were doing. And I was doing my own research, but I landed on arsenic poisoning and Lyme disease, but they weren't even the perfect combination. So I start reading some literature on heavy metal poisoning and the symptoms of it, and the abnormal shyness, the sound sensitivity, the fibromyalgia, the weight gain, Sometimes it can turn into weight loss, but for me, how it affected my hormones, it made me, get very heavy. I was at 220 pounds. So it was a little chunky, but I was a good fat model because most of my weight went in my legs because most people didn't know what was going on. So it was pretty fun.
Now you're at the point where you're trying something that seems to show the first promise of hope. What happened?
Once I became open to supplements, alternative health, I gently start moving down that road, not all in, but cautiously like testing some of these supplements and things that actually start making me feel better for the first time. And obviously I got off the medications. They weren't doing anything. And I tried pain pills and all that stuff as well, Patrick. It wasn't something that, that I got off quickly. Like I just explored things. I used to wear a neck roll around my neck. I was so sick from the chronic pain, laying in bed, crying out for answers, really. So, but once I started taking some of these supplements, they intrigued me because how can something like this, you've never been told before. This is information that wasn't out there at the time. I've never been told that there was another way, for this. It just wasn't, I wasn't educated. I wasn't, these films didn't exist. So as I started down those roads of supplements, of alternative health, I start seeing glimmers of light. The lights would turn on for a minute, I would see the light, and then it may get turned back off again. And I know that many that are on this journey, that's what they're looking for, a little bit of hope, some light in their life to not have to live and feel this way anymore. I didn't want to live and feel this way anymore. Then the light of the alternative health, the supplements, and I just started, very gently, on some of the things that I was being given, and to the point where I started getting better, and then taking that frustration I had at the medical system, which was not really warranted. They just weren't trained or equipped to take care of someone like me. I don't, at the time, they don't understand, right? And the system isn't built, the insurance isn't built for that. So, but that unrighteous anger, if you will, because they weren't to blame, they were doing the best that they could, turned into a passion and belief and inspiration to go further and deeper and to start, if this information was helping me, that I was truly toxic, and I was. I used to split test heavy metal challenge urine samples and send off to labs that I used in my environmental cleanup days because I didn't believe labs like Doctors Data, that I literally thought that it was a Ponzi scheme, stealing money from people to run lab tests that meant nothing. Like I literally, that was my belief. So I'd run split tests to see if they were just skewing my numbers to say that I was poisoned, because I just couldn't believe it. But I was so heavy metal poisoned at the cellular level, it was ridiculous. And this is some interesting information. Back in the day, like when you get an exposure, you're in a home or you're on a mine site or you're filling up your gas tank, there's a permissible exposure limit. It's called a PEL. And it's okay if you stay underneath that. You can get it every day. And they assume that those toxins that you're breathing in at the gas tank, you get every single time you fill up the gas tank, and in California, they have the vapor extraction so you don't smell the benzene and all the volatile organic compounds. So when you're filling up your gas tank, you're getting your PEL, your permissible exposure limit for the day of benzene. So if you fill up twice a day, you're exceeding it, but they say most people don't do that. But if you do that day in, day out, like truckers, or if you're in that business, those things are building up in your cells. They're not leaving. A lot of them are fat-loving toxins, and they stay stored in your body. And at the cellular level, they're causing damage, inflammation, which leads to every chronic disease that are out there. So that's why I got so upset, because I was off cleaning up stuff as an environmental consultant that no one got exposed to, spending millions of dollars, cleaning up hazardous substances that really in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the middle of Montana where there's no one's drinking the water. No one's doing anything. An old, farm fill-up station. I forget what they're called, but they're these little stations where the farmers can get their gas and their chemicals and their pesticides. And we have these spills that we're spending state money on to clean up, and no one's getting exposed. There's no exposure. The groundwater's being poisoned for sure. It's getting biodegraded. Bugs are eating it. We're monitoring this plume that's not going anywhere in the middle of a field, spending all this money, let alone every day. When you fill up your gas tank, you're getting the PEL of benzene breathed into your body. The regulations is that's okay for you to get that PEL as long as you don't exceed that permissible exposure limit. but the long-term accumulation of toxins, that's just one thing. Now you add in, your new carpet and no regulation on that VOC, or formaldehyde or the flame retardants. No studies, no research. And so you're being exposed to toxins. So you can see that's why I'm so passionate. I'm cleaning up hazardous waste for a living. I'm spending everyone's money, thinking I'm doing the environment and people good. And then I realize, and I thought that everything in the home was safe. I thought, that it was okay for all these exposures and amalgam fillings. And, I thought this was safe. I thought the government was taking care of me. And, to respect, I'm not like ripping on the government, but that's just what I thought. I thought they were taking care of me. And it's impossible for them to take care of us. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to be educated. We need to be aware of our surroundings and the toxins that are in our bodies.
So now at this point in your journey, this is before you got so committed to it that became your vocation. Tell me how you got well. What specifically were you doing?
Once I discovered that it was heavy metal toxicity was probably the biggest burden from when I was cleaning up these abandoned mines, we went on this journey of chelation therapy, detoxification. So some of the biggest things that helped me then, and now the technologies and even things that we've developed now are so much more advanced. And other companies and that you'll have on here, they've done there's some real research that's being done here and some real groundbreaking work. However, at the time, some of the big things that really made a difference that are still powerful today is a dietary change. At the cellular level, when you have a toxin that attaches to a cell membrane, even if it's a permissible dose for your day of toxins, it's going to cause quite a bit of cellular inflammation. And that cellular inflammation really decreases cell function, mitochondrial function, and causes extra inflammation. So what can you do? Well, remove other sources of inflammation that are coming to your body, like sugars and grains and pro-inflammatory foods. So I went on a what's called the cellular healing diet, which really knocked down the inflammation in my body. And so it took the inflammations from the toxins, and it's additive, right? So I had the toxic load causing massive cellular inflammation, and then I had I was drinking Mountain Dew at the time. Like, this is not good, nothing against Mountain Dew, but if you want to get inflammation, drink corn syrup, there's GMOs in it, and that's a whole nother topic. I'm sure that's going to be hot on this interview. But so one of the main things I did is okay, I can control what I control. It's going to take time to remove toxins out of my body. It's not something that happens overnight. I'm 44 years old. I'm still being exposed to toxins. My bucket is still being filled every day. I just got to do things to keep it at a level where it's not expressing disease and dysfunction in my body. There's no way to avoid this stuff. So one of the ways I removed some of that burden quickly is I knew that if I took my diet, which was additive, so the toxic burden was put me here, you add in the diet, that puts me up here, right? So I could bring myself back down to the middle ground by removing all the pro-inflammatory food toxins that were influencing my body and my biochemistry. So once that happened, a lot of things started to change. The weight now started to come off because the inflammation was decreased enough where my hormones were starting to hear leptin and ghrelin in my diet, and hormones started to balance again. And it provided even more hope. So that was one of the magic bullets is diet in your life, because that's something everybody can do to decrease your toxic load immediately. And within, a few weeks, your body can start feeling a lot better. But now I still had this guy. He was still sitting there haunting me, and that's not something that can be done in a day, a week, with a juice cleanse, a colon cleanse. It doesn't work like that. It's toxins at the cellular level. Your body's very smart. It's not going to release all of those toxins. It's storing them. In fact, our bodies are so brilliant. No matter what we do to them, it's going to adapt. Diabetes is just an adaptation of us not doing the right thing. So all disease is an adaptation for survival. So our cancer is an adaptation to survival. All the things that our bodies do in disease, it's doing what it can with what we give it. And if you give it the right foods, you give it the right supplements, this is what I love about proper detoxification, because it can really make a strong impact in your life, even when and why diets may be failing you, or why it's like one of those hidden causes that everyone talks about, but no one's really doing correctly or effectively. So we really started to explore this toxic burden, how to lower it. And once you start, you can support your liver, you can support your kidneys and all your detoxification pathways. Of course, your colon needs to be in a good place. But where we landed is not just pushing your body to release toxins with glutathione and a lot of the great products that are out there and supplements that are out there. We wanted true binders that really weren't going to cause the body to have to push something out, but to bind things up and remove them so that they were no longer causing that inflammatory action at the cellular level. And you want to do it gently and correctly. And so that when you're removing cause and not driving toxins out of your body, causing recirculation, redistribution, I feel that that's one of the best ways to help people lower that toxic burden. And that's one of the niches, I guess, that because I was sick, because I was heavy metal poisoned, that we really focused on because it made such an impact in my life.
Let's go back because I know you guys have evolved and the technology for detox has evolved. So let's go back to you because I know you mentioned chelation and people have tried chelation. So let's go back and talk about your journey and show how you evolved that thinking.
Again, so we talked about diet and using the dietary detox, if you will, and the cellular healing diet. And so the next step for us was really looking at what are the true binders that are out there? What are the other detoxification things we can do? And of course, we did support the liver and the kidneys, supported them so that they were robust enough to handle detoxification. We worked on the colon and did those things. But there's two types of toxins out there and that we had to address in our bodies and everyone's bodies. There's organic toxins made from organic things, living things. And then there's inorganic toxins, which are the heavy metals that I was exposed to. So benzene is an organic toxin. And those get bound up and removed differently and you can use amino acids, you can use, carbon's another good one because it binds organic things. So if you don't want to smell benzene, you put it through a carbon filter and it smells better, right? Mm-hmm. Benzene goes away because it's a volatile organic compound and carbons would bind those up. So carbons are great gut binders to help remove organic things. And there's inorganic toxins, which are bound completely differently. And at the time, in the short of it, the main things that made a difference to me is taking oral special organic carbons that we were using at the time. Some of them are in some products that we even now have developed, and we've kept those. I did a lot of research. I wound up looking at an Italian study and how the carbons really work, or the binders that I was using really work. They bind up the bile in the colon, where a lot of these toxins will reside as it dumps out of the liver. So that's a really good kind of stops the hepatic biliary recirculation of toxins because bile is reabsorbed in the lower small intestine. It gets reabsorbed in your body with the toxins, causing inflammation because it gets in your bloodstream. We got to reduce inflammation.
So you said carbons. So if someone is wanting to take this, it's some form of charcoal, isn't it?
So yeah, carbons are... there's a whole range here. Like I won't get into the details. You really don't hear it, but activated carbon is what you hear. A charcoal, a coconut carbon are some of the main products. There's better ones, in my opinion, than that based on the research. I don't want to get into the secret sauce of that, but those are in some of the products that I've developed with other companies. So I really can't talk about the sourcing of that. However, those things are great at binding organic toxins. And then inorganic toxins, what we used at the time were for heavy metals that were out there, and you probably heard of this through other medical doctors that you've talked to, is the DMSA, dicaptan-resistanic acid, and DMPS. Those are both really true heavy metal chelators, double thiol group, crab claw binders, sulfohedral groups, and they lock on to toxins. DMSA likes lead most. DMPS likes mercury a little better than DMSA, but they're great heavy metal binders. Unfortunately, in the supplement industry, we lost DMSA. And it's been researched. It's since World War II, they used it to lead and shrapnel and people getting lead poisoned and the lead generation. That's another whole a challenge. Lead is a big deal. It's it's in the news. It's in Flint, Michigan. It's not just in Flint. It's in 14 other cities. It's worse in my hometown, Pittsburgh. So it's horrible. So those binders were available, and I used a lot of those, and those really helped to turn the lights back on. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd get on a round of it, but at the same time, when I was doing it, they move a lot of metals quickly. And from some respects, that's good, but if someone's really sick, it can really have a toll on your gut and on your detoxification pathways. And in the process of removing those toxins, because it's so much of it, it causes inflammation at the time. So it's not like this happy there is a honeymoon day, I would say, for most people. You get this honeymoon day. It's like, wow, I almost feel normal again. I'm able to concentrate. I'm able to, not be so anxious that I can't have a conversation or want to be around people. So it can help there. But by day 2, you're like wiped out in bed. At least for me, it needs to be done through a medical doctor or a natural health practitioner. So they can really observe your symptomatology and really support you in such a way where it's not going to hurt you. But they're great. They're wonderful. Those are the binders that I was using at the time that really helped move me forward in my health.
So take us to the completion of your story and what you guys are doing now and what advances you've made since you've cleaned up your own toxic mess.
Over the last 15 years, since that was 15 years ago, I started the detoxification process, and it literally took me years and years and years to do these things. There wasn't so many supplements out on the market. There's some really great products out there today with good science that raise your intercellular glutathione, that will move toxins out of your body. There's these great methods. We have ours, and they work. We've worked with thousands of doctors since 2005, and we were really able to repeat and duplicate all the hard work we put in. I mean, years and years of traveling all over the country, finding these solutions, working with the best doctors. Now there's so many of them trained across the country. So it's a great time in natural health. There's so much opportunity and hope for healing. It's so exciting to be in an interview like this, knowing that the world is being educated, knowing that doctors and the public alike are now looking into the true causes of disease and dysfunction, and toxins are a big one. So with those binders and supporting my detoxification pathways, I was able to get well to the point where the light stayed on.
So you said it a couple of times, to support your detox pathways and to support your liver. How does someone support their liver?
Yeah, a wonderful way to support your liver is obviously milk thistle. That's tried and true, great research behind it. Milk thistle is a wonderful support. And the gut is also very important when you're detoxifying, because you need to keep that terrain. When your toxins are moving through your gut, mercury it kills everything, right? That's why they stick it in vaccines and everything else. It's the perfect preservative. But in your body, a preservative like that is going to wreak havoc on your microbiome. It's going to kill off your good guys, bad guys. It doesn't care. It's not in the war. It's the ruler. It's just wiping everybody out. So in that process of moving toxins and other toxins as well, glyphosate, it's killing off bugs. It's essentially a pesticide to your gut. And so when those toxins are moving through your body, there's no way to avoid it. It has to go through your detoxification pathways. That's why you want to support them. So the gut is another huge place where you need to work on. And what I like to tell people is you change your diet, you lower the inflammation, you start taking good probiotics. And I know there's going to be a lot of great people in here, because a lot of probiotics in the market really don't stay in the gut and help affect the gut, but rotating different high-level probiotics in your gut to really support your gut, to make sure that it's healthy enough to handle a little bit of friendly fire, if you will, as you're moving those toxins through your body. So that's why the gut is so important in the supporting while you're detoxifying.
Perfect. So pick up the story of your personal journey and where you guys took it from there.
What continues to drive me is there's so many people who didn't have that opportunity to get well, right? And I had that opportunity. And, so I love being part of things like this. I love educating, and I'm more of a behind the scene guy, Patrick. I don't normally, get on film, but when it comes to detoxification, I'm so passionate because it does transform lives when done correctly and safely. So over my journey, it took me about 5 years to get well, where the lights permanently stayed on. It's like I can think, I can talk to people again. I went from 220 down to 160 pounds. I was lean. I was able to get married. I got children. All my dreams came back. I had this beautiful redemption story. So, for us, it was my moral obligation to continue that journey and to now provide solutions to the world and really get into the science. So we developed protocols, started training doctors, and on supporting the detoxification pathways and developing products around that. We created new true binders, which I'll love to talk about some of that technology as well, and just proliferating that message, throughout the world.
So let's talk about these things that you called these true binders.
So some of the true binders out there, we talked about DMSA and DMPS, and then once DMSA was because the FDA shut down the manufacturing centers of DMSA, you no longer get it, and that you can get it overseas. You don't know if it's clean. We really had to spend years looking for a new type of binder that actually in your gut doesn't change and move. So we talk, someone might talk about chlorella as a metal magnet. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. It's not a magnet for metals. Does it in a beaker possibly weakly bind some metals? Yeah, for sure. When you ingest things, your microbiome alters the chemistry of that organic compound, and it eats and lives off of it. But in my research, I remember back in the day, we would use plants. We'd plant plants, and certain plants have a great heavy metal uptake. So they would literally plant the plants in a mine area, and the plants would uptake the metals, and you take the plants out and put them in a hazardous waste dump because they become toxic plants. So plants do have this heavy metal binding capacity. However, they're not strong binders in your gut or in your body, and they're not they can cause sometimes more damage and symptomology. Remember, when you circulate toxins, they start to cause inflammation in your body. So those aren't true binders. They're binders that really the mechanism of action in your body can't be well defined. So we need to find something that it's the same in a beaker as it's the same in your body. And so you look to nature. What does nature use to bind up toxins? Mm-hmm. So carbon has been used historically, to bind up toxins. When someone wasn't feeling well, they take it, and it's documented in history books. So it's a great one. It's in there. Again, it's an organic one. It can be altered in your gut, in your gut microbiome. But the other one that we used in cleanups and hazardous waste cleanups back in the day, and in water treatment facilities, they used it in Fukushima, is zeolites. And zeolites are wonderful aluminum silicate binders, and they're like made of glass. You could heat them up to 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and they're not going to break down. I mean, they're really strong binders. They're these wonderful, beautiful cages that use a very simple ion exchange. And how that works is it uses something that's heavier, bigger toxin or a heavy metal, something that's heavy, replace something that's lighter, heavy metal that may be in there. So sodium is a metal, and so is mercury. But mercury is a much heavier, it's much lower on the atomic periodic table. So it can come in and replace that guy. So it's a beautiful, simple chemistry, and it's a strong permanent bond. The heavier the metal, the heavier the toxin, and it can bind any positively charged toxin. Don't get me wrong, but it's really good for heavy metal toxicity. So when you find these things in the environment, because they're so good at binding heavy metals, they're polluted with heavy metals. And the reason we didn't use them in the past, back when we were using DMSA, DMPS, is because they were so contaminated. We would measure them, and we'd take them, and we didn't even know back in the day. We'd take them, really didn't see a difference. We didn't really feel any better. You put them in your gut and you poop them out, and we really didn't see much of a difference when we were testing these clinically. It didn't move the numbers, if you will. So we tabled zeolites probably for 10 years. But again, going back to when we lost DMSA and these other true binders, we revisited the zeolites. And when we said, hey, is there a way? And by now we knew that a lot of these zeolites were contaminated from other research and other companies measuring the amount of heavy metal and toxin contamination in these things. So we asked the question, is there a way to remove these heavy metals? And if you and to clear these cages, so there's a bunch of bad guys still living in these homes, and you want to put bad guys back in, you got to kick the old guys out. And the other issue is, if you have somebody that's already living in that, think of a high-rise apartment building with a bunch of bad guys in it. How are you going to put more bad guys in when you haven't kicked the old bad guys out? So we need to find a way to kick out the bad guys to make this available to put new bad guys in, so that we could, burn the building and move on and lower that toxic burden in our bodies. So the neat thing is there's a lot of chemistry that we were able to start thinking about, because anion exchange is pretty well established. It's a very simple, basic chemical process. So cation exchange, There's methods that we used in chemistry class, things called like supersaturation. If you supersaturate something, no matter if it's bigger or smaller, there's enough of the small guys that can still kick out the bad guy. So we developed this method of cleaning up the zeolites. It's a patent pending method. It'll be patented here probably in a year. But we were able to clean out all the bad guys. So now at these cages, when we're ingesting, at least, from our standpoint, there's this level of congruency you got to have, especially if you've been sick. How could I ever, the detriment heavy metals and toxins have had on people's body. How could we ever ingest something, even if there's maybe a lower chance of those things being released? How could we congruently put something in someone's body? So we had to find a way to clean out the bad guys, clean out these cages.
So there's great science about zeolite. What did you guys do?
So once we solved problem number one, problem number two is when we took zeolites in the past, they just stayed in the gut. And hepatic biliary toxins floating around there, it's going to grab a few of those. But really the toxins are where? In the cells. They're in our 3 trillion, how many trillion cells are there? 7 trillion cells in your body. And, so we had to go there. And how do you get there with the zeolite when the cages are really big and they're not going to leave the gut? So the neat science we were able to come up with is able to break these zeolites down in what we call molecular clinoptilolite fragments that are able to break. We broke them down and we studied these and we measured them. We broke them down to below the nanometer size to an angstrom size is more of a weight. That's how it works with cellular going across cell membranes. So we have little tiny ones that can cross into the cell. We also have ones that'll stay in the bloodstream, the size that'll stay in the bloodstream, and some we left around to stay in the gut. So, and the reason we did that through all the years of detoxifying, over the 15 years, is we really got to stop that recirculation. So if you're pulling stuff from your gut, you have this effect where toxins are being released here, so your body's going to start releasing it from other places, and it starts circulating. So if you don't have a binder in your blood or in your cells, you're stirring things up, and there's not a lot of sweepers around to take care of things. So the way we designed this product is to support your body's natural ability to detoxify. That's all I can say. But the science is, and our belief is, that if you take these cages and put them in your body in such a way that they're in your cells, you ingest this thing sublingually. We liposomed it so that we really make sure we get great cellular delivery. It gets into your body, it floats out there, but it's not just like in and gone. It gets out into the cells. It stays in your blood, so it's available to grab toxins everywhere, gut, blood, cells. So it's out there at a very, very low level. So it's gently supporting your body's natural ability to detoxify, so everyone can detox. And everyone should. So that was kind of our passion, is be able to develop something that's clean, effective, and safe and real that can really support those that are looking to properly detoxify. We're not the only ones out there that are doing these things, but what I can say from our standpoint is that when we develop something, we want to make sure it's safe and effective. I mean, I don't want to be a billboard for our own company, but there's a lot of great companies like us that are pushing the level, right? So in the supplement industry, and this is one of the things I'm also passionate about, Patrick, is that we need to raise the standard above the CNGMP. And a lot of companies are doing things that far exceed the CNGMP. We're running more heavy metal analysis on our products, more bacterial analysis on our products. I really want to elevate even more. Like, let's start running products for glyphosate. Let's start looking for other volatile organic toxins like benzenes, toluene, ethylbenzene. Let's raise the standard. Let's not wait for the government to force us or CGMP to force us. Let's just raise the standard. Let's go out there and make a difference in the world, and so everyone can elevate, so that the supplement companies that aren't doing that, the consumers looking for, man, are these people going far and above? What is the open, honest, and transparent methods that they're using? What are the analytical results? Those are the things that we want to inspire other supplement companies to do. And there's a lot of great friends of mine that are doing that. So I look forward to coming together and raising a higher standard than even what the government would require of us.
I love that you're doing that, and I love what you're doing. And it's very obvious that you're gratified by the results you're seeing in people. I know that you guys have sold primarily to healthcare professionals, but now are you coming out with something that goes direct to consumer?
So just recently, we decided that we were going through practitioners with most of our products, because that's where our heartbeat was. We had a large clinic. We train large clinics around the world, and so we love that. But at the same time, it's been limiting our scope. And so in this process of developing, especially developing CytoDetox and some of the products that are really don't need a doctor's supervision necessarily, always want to check with your healthcare practitioner, of course, but that don't require you to essentially go to an office and only get it from Joe Chiropractor, whoever it is. We feel like we can make a bigger impact by going direct to public with some very effective products. And the new company that we've created for that is our public-facing brand is going to be called True Cellular Formulas, because we believe you have to heal the cell to get well. That's the mantra of our organization. If you can get at the cellular level, support the cell, it can start to detoxify and do the things that it needs to do. So that's our new public-facing mission and operation, is be able to make these products now available to the public.
Well, I congratulate you on getting well and love your message of hope. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been my honor.
It's amazing how in life, when we have challenges and people face big health challenges, it can turn into a purpose for them and something that starts to help other people. That's what happened with Warren Phillips. Thank you for tuning into that interview. Next up, we have Dr. Grace Liu, who has a PhD in pharmacy. And even though academically her background is in pharmacology, she has a great interest and does a lot of work in gut health and natural ways and supplemental ways for people to achieve health and well-being. You're gonna learn a lot here from someone who's a terrific expert. Grace, thanks for being with us today. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Dr. Grace Liu. I'm founder of the Gut Institute. I've been in conventional medicine for over 20 years, taking care of complex medical cases. And I suddenly got sick after some pharmaceuticals, a Mirena IUD, some antibiotics I didn't really need, even a vaccine and a dental implant, dental care. And I had to kind of get myself better again. I discovered functional medicine, converted over to functional medicine. I was so grateful for functional medicine. I realized that a lot of the interventions I had that helped me to get better were all microbiome advances, things that really impacted my microbiome in a positive way. So I opened up the Gut Institute. I'm founder of the Gut Institute and CEO. And what we do is we're a platform for education. We like to share about what the microbiome is. These are our other half. Literally, the number of cells in our microbiome, 100 trillion cells, are equivalent to ours. They're literally 1-to-1 to our cells, somatic cells. And they're our other half. And in my case, I hope they're my better half. They can help us be our optimal best. Their DNA is like 150 to 300 times more than us. It's a whole set of apps, that I don't have to dig into. All I have to do is just feed them, and they give us everything we need: serotonin and all our good neurotransmitters for happiness, as well as longevity chemicals, anti-cancer chemicals, anti-spirochete, antimicrobial chemicals that really keep us happy, healthy, and whole.
For the longest time, the traditional medical model was antibiotics. You coming from the pharmacy world, how did you see that play out?
When all the microbiome data started to come out, and especially FMTs, I don't know if you're aware of what FMTs are, fecal microbiota transplant. So literally people are taking poop and inserting it, like either nasogastrically through the nose or into the stomach. This procedure would actually cure people and prevent death. And when that came out, a lot of my pharmacy friends and physician friends, no one could believe it. They just were aghast. And now it's like commonplace, and it saves people's lives. And what we're realizing now, that this is the first time in human history kids are dying before their parents or even before their grandparents. This has never happened before. And a lot of it, like you mentioned, is linked to antibiotics. This is the first time in our life where we're killing off the microbiome of the domesticated animals that we eat: chicken, poultry, pork, cattle, beef. They get so many veterinary antibiotics, and it affects us. We're finding kids have high levels of antibiotics that are veterinary antibiotics. And studies show now the use of antibiotics will be associated with obesity later. And this is cattle people and the poultry industry and other industries, they know this. They made more profit by making their animals fatter by giving them antibiotics.
Yeah.
But this impacts us. Instead of dying from malaria or infectious diseases that would normally wipe us out, like plague, now we're dying these slow chronic conditions and having mental illness from a very early age. So many children now are born with spectrum conditions or even develop early cancer. And they're also getting conditions that only elderly used to get, like obesity, cancers, coronary artery disease, diabetes, arthritis. But we're seeing them now in children, teens, and people in their 20s.
One of the things that you talked about was the microbiome's effect on hormones with males.
Yes. There's been a theory about, it's called the gelding theory. As you're probably aware, gelding is a castrated horse, a stallion, in fact, a male horse. And studies are showing that a high amount of endotoxemia, that these are lipopolysaccharides. This is the cell wall of pathogenic gram-negative bacteria.
Yeah.
They're in the bloodstream of people who happen to have low testosterone. That's also known as hypogonadism. This is sort of an epic condition. I ask some of my guy friends who are under age 40, and they tell me a lot of their dude friends do not have normal function. And I don't know if I can say this on interview, but they don't have normal morning wood, and they have complaints, that they're kind of tired or achy, not feeling super happy, maybe even depressed or agitated and anxious. Mm-hmm. And finally, Kelton Tremelin and Natalie McVeigh, a whole team of people at the School of Pharmacy in Adelaide, at one of the universities, they did a prospective study. They took really healthy males, 18 to 40, no health conditions at all, injected them with endotoxin from E. coli. It's the lipopolysaccharide, the pro-inflammatory part of the cell wall of pathogenic E. coli. They used a low dose, like 0.8 nanograms per kilo, and they were able to induce this reduction in testosterone within only a few hours. Right. And we see a lot of endotoxemia in people. All my clients come to me, they have some form of endotoxemia. And this is from overuse of antibiotics, perhaps stress, even when people get surgeries, they get IV antibiotics. They're essentially wiping out all their good gut flora that normally protect us. And then they're no longer able to keep off all the pathogenic gram-negatives and other flora like fungal overgrowths and parasites. With our good stuff, we can, barely ward all these other invading pathogens that we get contact with, Mm-hmm. And what it means for us is that we have to do some weeding or gardening of this biome. We have protocols, they reset biological rhythms like adrenals and hormones. So we quickly see a change in testosterone. A lot of our men will report khaki busting boners in just 2 weeks or less, even though they could have had problems for like years or decades even. We've had men like 60s and 70s reporting that they're in 4 months or less, all their functions back. Not only do they have morning wood, they have midnight wood. I'm like, wow, okay, awesome. And we see like testosterone, we do all the labs, we don't guess, we test all the time. Yeah. Free testosterone will triple. Total testosterone may double or go up 1.5 times. And people just feel generally awesome. They have better stress resilience. All their aches tend to go away. If they had autoimmunity, we see these antibodies normalize or like almost near normalization, and they feel awesome and great. Right. And I just love hearing those stories. And it's because we have this terrain recolonization protocol and we have a mojo reset protocol. So we get all the hormones back as fast as we can, as naturally as possible. Mm-hmm. So those are all our favorite supplements that bring that all about. And when we recolonize the terrain in the body, we're going nose to toes, right? Or for men, it's tongue to testicle. All our body, the bacteria are connected through the lymph. It's a highway system through our body. And when we change the gut or the nose, ear, nose, mouth, and throat, we're also changing the whole body, including prostate, lymph nodes, for women, breasts, ovarian. Everything has sort of a microbiome. The bacteria kind of live there at low doses, but they live there. And they normally take care of us, keep the whole terrain clean and healthy and vibrant, pink. But when we lose those good ones, then we can get colonized by the invaders temporarily or, for a longer period of time. It's all reversible, I believe.
So let's talk about terrain restoration, the protocol that you have. How would you work with someone on that?
Thank you so much for asking about the male program. We have a dude program. If people go to thegutinstitute.com/dude, D-U-D, kind of stands for decode UR, your dick education program. So we're really trying to, share with people like how the terrain gets messed up and then how to restore it. So it's kind of like an app. Yeah. For instance, we can't get good probiotics in, which are the good, healthy, good flora for our body. If let's say like you try to download an app on your phone or computer, if it's completely full, you may get an error message saying, oh, got to change out your memory card or reduce, change your memory. And so you have to delete some apps or something, right? To get the good, to load the app you want. My kids used to put all kinds of junk apps and games on my phone, so I'd be constantly deleting them. So it's kind of like our gut flora and our whole terrain. It can get overgrown. So after antibiotics, like for instance, for women, if they got antibiotics, we were often told by the pharmacist, and I would counsel people at the time when they pick up an antibiotic, oh, be careful if you get a normal yeast infection, see your doctor, you may need an antifungal drug or a topical cream, antifungal topical cream. Mm-hmm. Very commonly, when we take an antibiotic and there's not enough probiotics or people don't take an antifungal at the same time, they would get overgrown with fungal overgrowths and then other pathogenic overgrowths, including the bacteria that have these LPS, the endotoxin. So what we do is we reverse some of that. We kind of reverse engineer what we really want. We want a good balance, like great majority good flora, and then only a small amount of pathogens. when people come to us, they usually have this huge, enormous amount of pathogenic flora, especially if they've traveled or eat sushi. Everyone's kind of got parasites, in my opinion. That's what apparently, studies may show. So we try to lower those very gently with a little bit of weeding and certain botanicals that work for a lot of people. And we bring in high potency probiotics if they can tolerate it, and some soil probiotics. These are spore-based. They're really awesome. They work and lower different gram negatives like Clostridium, which is super neurotoxic, makes people have brain fog, body fat, and a lot of fatigue issues. And it's highly associated with spectrum, gut microbiomes. So we have those bacteria, we can get them in, and we slowly start to eke out those pathogenic ones, the red zone ones. On testing, they look like red zones. And then we bring in the good stuff, the green zone ones. So for me, I kind of look at someone's gut microbiome like a wealth portfolio. We want to add in lots of assets, lower the liabilities, get good performing stock, right? S&P 100 and or Berkshire Hathaway or Apple, whatever people's, long-standing, good performing stock, and then lower as much risk as possible. And diversification. Yeah. So when we our tools can include a lot of the armamentum of like a whole bunch of diverse kind of probiotics. We're so fortunate. There's so many different good brands out there, and I make one as well that increases the diversity according to studies.
I want to get specific because I want people who are watching to be able to improve their microbiome just from listening to you. How should people use probiotics? What should they be looking for? What's a good starting point?
So there's some practical tips people can keep in mind when they're selecting a probiotic and using it for them and their family, or even their dogs or pets. There are a lot of different brands on the market, like for instance, Sprout and Whole Foods and online. There's so many different varieties. Some have third-party testing, and it's always great to look at third-party testing that there's as much potency in the bottle as what's stated. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So the good brands, what we do is we overstuff. Like, for instance, our probiotic, on our certificate of analysis, COA, we've got 5 times the amount actually in the bottle at the very time of production and manufacturing. So most companies, really professional companies, do that. So they can read up on that. And the other is just talking to healthcare practitioners, particularly the integrative functional medicine industry. We kind of know which ones work. Like, I work with so many complex cases. I don't get the cases where it's like one autoimmune condition. What we typically see are people who've been through multiple practitioners already. They have been on every product already, and they're a little tougher. They may have 3 autoimmune conditions, a multiple amount of food allergies, and a lot of brain fog, body fat, and fatigue issues, for instance. So what we see is if it works on a complex case like that, it works for like the great majority of people. So we've gone through a lot of different probiotics to see what really works. We also do testing to see that they're engrafting. We can see some of the strains on certain testing, and that's what I look for. If it's a good probiotic, it'll engraft. And engraftment means it's actually sticking in the system and producing. So it's kind of like a good asset, it's like a good stock, and you keep seeing the dividends because they're showing up on there. Not everything engrafts. In fact, the lower concentration in the gut, it's harder for it to engraft actually, but it'll eventually show up. So we keep just looking for it. If people feel better, we know it's probably engrafting, even though we don't see it on the testing, because engraftment won't necessarily show up until it's actually there. The lower the concentration, unfortunately, won't show up until much, much later.
So are there any kind of bacteria that people should be looking for? I've seen some probiotics with 6 strains, some with 20. What should they be looking for?
That's a wonderful question. For me, anything multi-strain is ideal. I don't have a problem with mono strains, like having a probiotic with 1 strain. Certain probiotics are so potent, even if it's a single strain and a very low dose, like 5 billion or 10 billion, it's not bad. So again, it kind of goes with what actually may work. And there can be studies or just anecdotal information from certain functional medicine practitioners that people can kind of listen about. I'm not so much into a lot of the strains. Some people get really fixated on the strains. For me, what I see is in clinical studies, when we happen to have these studies or animal studies, the strains all have like similar benefits. It's a class effect almost. So it's almost like one species, for instance, like we have a lot of bifidolongum in our probiotic. It turns out, when I drill down all different strains of bifidolongum, because they have identifiers, so these are strains, it doesn't necessarily matter actually what the strain is. They seem to have a class effect. All bifidolongum appear to have like certain like classifications, characteristics. And it's kind of like Game of Thrones, like Lannisters are this way, and then Targaryens are this way. They all drive, they all fly dragons, and then but some go mad, not all of them, and some Lannisters are really evil, but not all of them, but yeah, there's some differentials, but there's also some class effects, like what in general, like characteristics these families may have, the bacteria, genera, and species may actually have.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a big question because there's so many different probiotics out there. I'm kind of agnostic, and I feel like if it works, that's awesome. And then you may want to diversify and trick it up a bit.
So should people cycle through different types and brands?
Cycling, I think, has benefits. I haven't seen any studies to validate that, but if we think about our ancestral heritage for human beings, Homo sapiens, we kind of moved around, migrated, and we ate kind of foods that were seasonal. So even the bacteria in our environments and our ecological niche probably rotated out a bit. So I do believe there's a benefit to cycling. What I do for clients, we do a probiotic parade. And I leave it up to my clients and my cases. They can do a couple brands, every day, or they can do 1 or 2 brands for a week at a time and then switch it up. I don't really see huge differences. Certain brands, though, I found have been hugely successful for our clients. I'll name a couple. So ours for sure is foundational. It's called Bifida maximus. Certain strains in there are very good for neuropsych and gut digestion, and it helps a lot of those things. A lot of our clients can eat gluten and dairy again in a really short period of time, 4 to 2 weeks or less. I'm not saying they should normally eat these every day. American wheat may have a lot of problems, so I don't really recommend our customers and clients to really eat wheat every day. But if they're in Europe, it may not be so problematic. And our probiotic has those strains that helps to ameliorate a lot of inflammation in the gut so people can do these things and not die. A lot of our clients, when they come to us, they can't eat dairy or wheat at all, and they get huge problems, autoimmune problems, pre-cancer, post-cancer risk problems. So we don't recommend that until they've fixed the gut. But there are a couple brands that are just incredible. So I'll share them. Like one is called Equilibrium. It's 115 strain, 1 billion probiotic per capsule. It's incredible. We get so many great responses from that. Increasing liberalization of diet. It just helps support the gut. It lowers a lot of the pathogens. It works really complementary with ours. A second one is a spore-based one. It's a newer one. It's by Enviromedica. It's called TerraFlora. Really incredible. We see so great responses with that. It also adds the ability to liberalize the diet, eat gluten and dairy without so many problems. People feel more happy on it. I feel more happy on it. It produces some B vitamins. I tend to have like a low amount of B vitamins for some reason, probably because I have longstanding still residual gut problems, but always hacking that. But B vitamins, we may not absorb it without the good gut flora. And then also, even if we're eating supplements or good dietary sources of B vitamins, we need the good gut flora there to actually upload them, to upregulate them. So this brand has helped me a lot, and I can feel it in my mood and other things. And we're hearing great reports, like athletes are seeing awesome performance, even though, and despite they try other probiotics, they don't really quite see that. So there's something really great about that formulation. We also use very high dose from other. So our brand Bifida maximus is histamine free, which is amazing and awesome. That's really great for our clients because in the beginning they have a lot of inflammation and there's histamines all over. They can't eat even normal foods like sauerkraut or kombucha, which are fermented. So there's a lot of histamines in them. But quickly after the gut rehab, they can. But they use our probiotic, which is histamine, as a foundational probiotic in the beginning. And then we're able to shift to histamine producing ones like L. plantarum, L. acidophilus, other really good flora that we kind of want in the gut eventually, and add diversity. So we start to bring those in. And some of those strains that we love are like, there's a lot of good, really amazing brands out there that have that. All the functional medicine brands have them. So we love, I'm agnostic. We use a lot of the others, to add in the diversity after that. Megaspore is another, so many tremendous, amazing probiotics out there.
Terrific. So is this something that somebody should do forever, or is there a time when people should be taking a break from their probiotics?
That's a wonderful thought and insight. I'm not sure. I think every person's kind of different. Maybe it depends. From what I see, our clients can go to a maintenance program and then we add in fiber.
Yeah.
So fiber are known technically as prebiotics. Prebiotics are the fertilizer for all the good gut flora. And it's like fertilizer, like that just massively grows them. So I don't think it's totally necessary to do high dose probiotics all the time forever. I think there are times when people are stressed, like either traveling, jet lag, emotional stress, or, holiday stress. They're eating foods that they're not, normally adapted to eating. Then it's a great time to add in more probiotics and diversify and add in other things. If people are having an immense acute stress, like gastroenteritis, a parasite, those are obviously times people want to up it at that time. I found, when people are using probiotics and their fiber, I call bionic fiber, they can mix any group of prebiotics that they want and support certain species that we see that we want to have high.
Right.
It's a certain recipe, but people can customize it or just do a generic recipe. They can add in about 20 to 40 grams of fiber a day and really maintain the native flora without taking huge doses of probiotics. It's sort of cost saving as well, but it's also going to, our flora, if they don't get enough mucus and the fiber from our diet, they're going to start dying off, and that's not pleasant or good. So we do want to keep them fed and between meals as well. They eat our mucus in between meals. So there's ways that we can maintain them. It's kind of like a garden. As long as you water it and give it some sunlight, very little maintenance is needed. So our flora is kind of the same. They need like some basic care, like water and sunlight, and that's in the form of the carbon bonds inside fiber. They can break them all down and get their energy that they need. A lot of diets, I love like paleo diet, but there are some gut healing diets like AIP, SCD diet, specific carb diet, autoimmune paleo diet, or GAPS diet. They're actually not super high in fiber. And they're great healing diets, but they're not so safe to be on long term. Even keto or like paleo diet may have a lot of greens and vegetables, but big salad is really only 2 to 3 grams of fiber. It's not really going to be enough to really sustain all the species that we have in the gut. If people can tolerate complex carbs, if we look at centenarian societies that live 80, 90, 100 years that are chronic disease-free, cancer-free, like areas part of as like Italy and Crete, Okinawan, Seventh-day Adventists in California, these societies were found to have high concentrations, high density of longevity individuals, men and women in their 80, 90, 100 years old with no conditions. They're really happy. What they found was their microbiome had a signature of health that people who have no chronic diseases, they emulate, they have the same ones. They have a kind of a constellation of bacteria. I call them the ABCs. They have Akkermansia, which is a main species. It's 1 to 5% of our whole portfolio of our flora. They have a lot of good Bacteroides and good Bifidolongum. And Japanese discovered this strain, Bifidolongum. It's actually found in people with longevity. So hence they called it Bifidobacterium longum. Our probiotic is one of the highest density strengths actually on the market for Bifidolongum. I think it gives us this centenarian kind of profile. So part of the ABCs is Bifidobacterium longum. So it also protects the brain. It's found associated with protection from autism and ADHD in one children's study published by Party back in 2015. The second is Clostridioides. This is the C's as part of the ABC constellation of good gut flora that will lead us into like a long-term lifestyle of long-lived health. Clostridioides makes butyrate, and butyrate's the main fat. It's found in butter, but you have to eat 20 pounds of butter to get the amount that our gut flora produce when we're feeding them really well, fertilizing them really well with 30 to 50 grams of fiber every day. But Clostridioides makes the butyrate, and butyrate is the special food that nourishes our colonocytes, our gut cells. The colonocytes line our gut, and our gut, when they splay it open, it's as big as a tennis court. And I think with the surface of our bacteria, bacteria have surface area, right? I think actually when we take into account the whole GI tract and the surface area of our own bacteria, which are factories for amazing, machinery, biochemistry, and metabolites that, nourish us and nourish our brains and keep them happy and whole, the whole surface area is probably as big as like 10 football fields, I feel like. It's just so dense, right? And they're all in there. But they need to be nourished. Our colonocytes, we literally will regenerate a whole GI tract every 72 hours. And this has to be nourished and fed for us to adequately do that. We also have to sleep well enough, right? And we regenerate when we're in the good parasympathetic nervous system. That's why I love all the hacks that we do in functional medicine and with chiropractic work and, things that help our vagal nerve and our nervous system where we're not like impinging our necks or, our body, and doing massage and meditation. All those are, and yoga and prayer. Those all are amazing because they all keep our GI tract really rolling smoothly.
That's tremendous. It's complex, but there's a lot of research that's being done. I love the information that's coming out. In closing, the microbiome starts in the nose and mouth. What do you do to get people to start at the very top?
So in our recolonization protocols, where we go nose to toes or tongue to tail, we have everything. So for the sinuses, we have certain nasal sprays we use, for instance, grapeseed extract or olive leaf extract, or even silver, colloidal silver, Argentine nasal. Sometimes we have to break the biofilms if there's a lot of fungal overgrowths or marcons, or these are like really hardy, pathogenic flora, staph and MRSA. If people are in the hospital a lot, they may have some colonization. So we do a lot of sprays there. And then we also do mouth sprays and dental toothpaste. One new product that came out is called Dentalcidin. And Rachel Fresca is an amazing formulator. She made Biocidin. Now she made it into a toothpaste version. It's amazing. We get great results with that. And we do some sprays that are really natural, like Propolis spray. There's an amazing product by Beekeepers Natural. I just rave about them all the time, because when we use 5 to 10 sprays once or twice a day, people lower all their pathogens in their mouth, because Propolis, royal jelly, and the ingredients that we get from bees. Humans and Homo sapien have co-evolved with bees and honey for millennia, and for them, propolis and royal jelly and all the components in the hive, those are the immune system for the hive,
Right.
and it protects them. And we've eaten honey for millennia. When we eat that, and the propolis and the royal jelly, it protects us too, tongue to tail, as soon as we eat it. So the propolis spray from Beekeepers Natural is amazing. It can lower marcons. Study shows it's antiviral, it's antifungal as well. So people who have mild thrush, it's like a white coat on their tongue. Chinese medicine likes to look at the tongue. It's the doorway to the microbiome. So it's wonderful that we have all these ancient techniques that now actually have a lot of relevance, now that we understand our whole terrain and all these 100 trillion bacteria that basically hijack our health or make us superhuman, super bionic human. So the propolis spray is amazing. We also do other sprays. Biocidin actually has a spray as well. And then we do a lot of powdered probiotics. So our Bifidobacter is one stealthy benefit of it is because it's powder. When people put it in their mouth, they'll accidentally kind of breathe it in. It goes to the respiratory and lung microbiome and those meridian areas. And they will actually get a little bit, probably, I suspect, into their sinuses a bit. So that's a way we repopulate with the probiotic. And so we use different powders also, so people can improve their mouth microbiome.
Yeah.
There are a couple cautions I would say about probiotics, which I forgot to mention earlier. Certain probiotics, because people have multiple levels of dysbiosis, they've had illness maybe for 5-10 years when they really think about it, brain fog, body fat, or fatigue issues, or autoimmunity or immune problems. We avoid 2 strains of probiotic bacteria. They're not necessarily actually probiotic for everybody. Probiotic means it improves the population of good bacteria and have health benefits. One is called S. boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii. It's a yeast. So a lot of our clients come to us, they have a lot of fungal overgrowths and yeast overgrowths, and they even have autoimmunity against some of their own yeast in their body or own candida. They may have antibodies to it. So we don't use any S. boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii. We found people will have negative reactions. They may be very silent, very subtle, but they can occur 1 or 2, 4 weeks later, and that's not great. And same with strep. Streptococcus thermophilus is a common probiotic. It's a super cheap one. As a manufacturer, I know the pricing, and super cheap. It's found in the food industry, used in yogurt a lot, but it's not necessarily super native for humans. And if people have a neurologic condition or something called PANDAS in children, there's a pediatric autoimmune neuropsych condition called PANDAS disorder, where there's personality changes, tics, seizures, things like that. In adults, what I see is people tend to have agitation or anxiety or a lot of OCD behaviors, fixation on things, and autoimmunity also, particularly skin autoimmunity. They usually have autoimmune problems to strep. So we're not going to give a strep probiotic to someone. I did an experiment, and I OD'd on a bunch of strep, and I gave myself SIBO for a month. So I was trying to see if it would ever be safe for people. But I have a feeling if people have some kind of, history, it's not going to be awesome. Low dose may be okay, but in the beginning and when we're healing, we avoid certain things because of the contraindication nature. Yeah.
Thank you for covering that. That's the stuff to watch out for. Grace, this has been terrific. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun to share about our poop and our good bacteria.
I'm always fascinated by people who have impeccable academic credentials in the conventional ways of what's called healthcare, but they find their way to this more natural form of achieving health and well-being. I'm really pleased that we could share this interview with you. Dr. Anna Cabeca is an expert in women's health. She's an OBGYN, but she doesn't practice like a conventional OBGYN. She practices functional medicine and has found many natural solutions to women who suffer with a variety of challenges. Women's health, big topic, a lot of hope for them in the world of supplementation, but you need an expert who understands their circumstances and has matched that to natural approaches towards health. So enjoy this interview with Dr. Annika Becker. So Anna, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Tell us a bit about your background and what you do.
Yeah, well, I am a women's health specialist. I trained as a gynecologist and obstetrician at Emory University, and then I further trained in integrative medicine and regenerative medicine. And so now I really lead women, especially through the tumultuous stages of transitional hormone changes like menopause, and help them from beyond menopause into a new age of wonder seamlessly. I will say menopause is mandatory, but suffering is optional. And so I empower women to really take charge of their own health in this way.
So I know when you think about traditional medical practice, the treatment for menopause is hormones, and usually a specific kind of hormone that is used. But I think that you have a broader practice than that. Can you talk about what you've integrated into your practice and why?
Yeah, well, after approximately 30 years of practicing medicine, I learned that, and especially when it comes to women's health, that it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones, right? It just takes more. We have to get to the underlying issues of what's causing the imbalances and to restore our hormones naturally. What I've seen happen as women age, as we're aging, it becomes one prescription after another prescription, and we're only patching the problems and not addressing the reason for the symptoms, which is our body trying to tell us something. And women innately know this. They're in tune. They have this intuition, like something's wrong. And sadly, oftentimes it's antidepressants, it's birth control pills, it's, synthetic hormones that are being given. And then from there, maybe surgery and additional medications. It's a challenge for women.
So I know you shifted your practice to being mostly an online practice now, but you still have people from all around the world who come to see you. Why do people come to see you? What are they looking for?
Oftentimes, a woman will come initially, say, for example, in her 30s, complaining of mood swings, PMS, irritability, and irregular cycles, breakthrough bleeding. This is kind of starting this window, which I call this transition window between age 35 and 55. And it's really a phase of hormonal vulnerability and neurologic vulnerability. And I can explain that. But what happens in our 30s is we're getting this decline of progesterone that's happening. And so some of the natural symptoms some of the natural symptoms is to have some breakthrough bleeding and this PMS experience. And one thing I always tell my patients, if you only hate your husband 2 weeks out of the month, it's your hormones, not necessarily your husband, right? So that physiology affects our behavior. But what happens, a client comes in and we're going to say, well, here's some birth control pills to shut down your symptoms, and here's some antidepressants to help with the PMS and the anxiety and the depression, right? But we never address what's happening with the hormones and how that's affecting some of our other systems in our body. So then typically a patient comes back in her 40s, continuing to have problems, and they're on birth control pills, on the antidepressant, and maybe we do an endometrial ablation or a hysterectomy to fix those continued irregular bleeding problems, right? We're still experiencing at the same time some memory issues, some brain fog, some irritability, and certainly loss of libido and difficulty in relationship. And sadly, sometimes we're like, well, we've done everything as a gynecologist. We've removed your uterus. We've taken out your ovaries. Well, here's a referral to a psychiatrist and my favorite divorce attorney, right? Because we've never addressed the underlying symptoms. But as I practiced, and I went from doing, honestly, as I learned, as I continued to load things into my doctor's bag, such as natural options for patients, and I empowered them in their own health to take charge of their own health through nutrition and lifestyle, and some supplements, and some herbs, and some bioidentical hormones. I went from doing 2 to 3 surgeries a week to 2 to 3 a year, because those symptoms that were being experienced, such as the cramping, pain, bleeding, those issues like that, were resolved by balancing the hormones. And mostly that's through nutrition and lifestyle, and maybe a little bit of bioidentical hormones. That's how powerful this is.
So let's talk about how you work with someone. Obviously, here we're focused on supplements, but many of the people that we interview talk about supplements being supplemental and not foundational. How does this blend into your program?
So, for example, when a client's coming in and their first steps as they come into my practice and they're having issues, I would put them on a modified elimination diet. Like, get the crap out of your diet, right? The stuff that we know: no white, no wheat, no sweet, very little red meat. And the modified elimination, now I call it my Keto Green Way. And this is about getting intermittent fasting in and also restricting carbs, but having plenty of plant-based foods. So from the nutrition aspect, we're looking at a food plan that's healthy, clean, whole foods, and a lifestyle plan, the timing of our meals, and even, how we're eating our meals, saying grace before our meal, or, creating an intention of inner peace so we can help fight the constant cortisol stresses, or the stress hormone cortisol, that can be affecting us adversely, and certainly affects women, affects our digestion, it affects our hormones. So we have to get those, if we get those three things under control, we're making some radical improvements. And so while they're doing this intermittent fasting and more keto green, getting our body into a nutritional balance. So ketosis is really important in this transition state for women for menopause and beyond, because we are having impaired glucose utilization in the brain, according to studies that we're now looking at women and in menopause, in this perimenopause time period, as estrogen and progesterone are declining, the ability to utilize glucose in the brain as fuel is also declining. So shifting to ketones is really powerful for women. So fasting, increasing fasting intervals, improving intermittent fasting, using nutrition to help improves energy, decreases symptoms. We've seen a reduction. We've interviewed approximately 500 clients in our online survey, pre and post a 10-day nutritional challenge. And in even just 10 days, we can see a 50% reduction in symptom scores. So that's huge. So that lifestyle aspect is huge. Getting a good night's sleep, can't say enough about that, right? Anti-aging at its finest.
Now with this, we have a foundation. But let me ask you, is there a supplement plan that you integrate with this?
Yeah, I typically say that if there's only 2 supplements that I want a client to walk away with, it's omega-3 fatty acids. We need essential fatty acids, right? Good quality DHA, EPA. We know how important that is for brain health as an antioxidant, and also to empower our brain to function well. So, and our diets are deficient. They often are so deficient in healthy omega-3s, so we have to get them. But where we get these omega-3s from are crucially important. And I want to spend a minute on this because as an obstetrician, when practicing obstetrics, I knew very early on that we need to supplement with omegas. This is back in the 1990s where they weren't part of our prenatal packs at that time. So I started recommending, you have to get a fish oil. Here's your prenatal vitamin prescription, right? I didn't know how bad some of those prescriptions were at the time. And then there was a recall from one of the, these main superstores for their fish oils for heavy mercury content. And that's when I said, I need to find out what are the best brands, the safest brands, sustainably sourced, environmentally conscious brands, so that I'm not, number one, risking my patients' health and their baby's health, right? Heavy metals, mercury, that's not good for a mom, that's not good for a baby. And the fact that they were in omega-3s just blew my mind. I had no idea. So that led me into the study of supplementations, and that's when I started carrying them in my office, because I could say, this is the gold standard. This is what you want. This is what you look for. These are marks of sustainability. These are mark of heavy metal testing. And you need this for your brain. You need this for your baby's brain. And so that's where I started way back when, late 1990s, early 2000s, in using high quality supplements, figuring out that not all brands are created equal. Not everything over the counter is what it says it is, right? Can't judge a book by its cover type thing. And that was really eye-opening. And then part of my own journey, being diagnosed with menopause at 38, and then reversing it, led me into discovering other key nutritional supplements. And one of the things I created was a greens blend that has adrenal adaptogens in it and other herbs that complement each other. And the reason is that when we are struggling with hormonal balance, we need alkalinizers, we need detoxifiers, we need these nutritional ingredients that help empower our body to do what it needs to do, to take care of itself, right? And it's smart, you just need to give it the right fuel. And so I created a greens blend called Mighty Maca Plus, and it has over 30 ingredients. Maca being a key ingredient is organic and kosher from Peru. That, maca is a root that grows above 11,000 feet in the Andes. It's indigenous to Peru. And it's a really cool story, a really cool background story, because the ancient Incan warriors were reported to have taken maca before they went into battle to increase their energy and stamina. Well, when I went to Peru when I was 38, 39, I was infertile and I was menopausal and I was told I would never be able to have another child. And I was depressed and just struggling. Everyone said, take maca. And then they would elbow my husband. It's the Peruvian Viagra. Take some maca. So me, the skeptical scientist, said, well, what's in it? Well, first of all, I'm taking the maca, right? There's everyone telling me, okay, I'm going to try anything. But secondly, it tasted pretty terrible to me. And so if I'm going to drink something that doesn't taste good, I really want to know the science behind it. So the research, maca in and of itself is very unique. It contains its own individual proteins called macaines, and it's also rich in arginine, which increases nitric oxide production, which voila, is how Viagra works, right? There was some current science to back up this handed down wisdom, and that was a key ingredient. But as I traveled around the world, I found other ingredients, the importance of greens, spirulina, chlorella, the importance of turmeric, quercetin, resveratrol, that combining these ingredients could be more effective than any one ingredient by itself. And so I recommend that, or some type of alkalinizing, detoxifying combination that we can get, or definitely from whole food sources. So sprouts and cruciferous vegetables and spices, using plenty of spices in our diet. And that's why I like to provide my clients with menus and recipes and plans to make that easy so they can see what does my plate need to look like? Mm-hmm. What does a healthy daily diet look like, right? And number one, how do we make it easy for them?
Is there anything else that you recommend to clients, whether you make them or not?
Yeah, there are several things. Magnesium is a big one. Magnesium L-threonate at nighttime to help with sleep. Vitamin D, a good vitamin D3 supplementation, a supplement with K2 combination. It's important to have the two combined at appropriate ratios, so that's critical. And what else do I recommend? I recommend sometimes protein, having a healthy protein shake to make something easy and to get added protein, especially as we're getting older. Sometimes it's harder to digest. So occasionally having easily digestible protein powders can help with that. Another thing that I recommend, melatonin at nighttime for sleep as well. And some herbs and combination herbs that I use for helping with menstrual regularity, like Vitex chasteberry is another great one. And using vitamin C and milk thistle, methylated B vitamins, all of those are essential. And it's sometimes really hard to get in our diet at healthy levels on a regular basis. So it's often good to have a good supplementation to be kind of keeping our tank full, or at least keeping us from bottoming out. And progesterone, bioidentical progesterone, is another thing that I'll recommend for clients transdermally, as well as sometimes something like DHEA in combination.
I know that you specialize in women's health, but let me ask you this from the outside. With family members that might be men, do you have any particular recommendations for them regarding their nutrition or supplementation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a big part, just like with women, it's getting into that, periodically getting into ketosis, but not forgetting those plant-based foods, not forgetting that, doing the intermittent fasting. And of course, the best supplement, exercise and movement. Another one, sleep, a good night's sleep. For men too, the maca and green combination, like the Mighty Maca that I mentioned, or other combinations that can help with that. Also arginine and magnesium, same thing for guys. Getting a good night's sleep, whatever we need to do to get you a good night's sleep is really, really powerful.
Let's talk about sexual health and supplementation. What do you recommend there?
So for men for sexual health, one of the things that I've recommended, there's a couple formulas that I've recommended, but arginine, like I mentioned, is very good for nitric oxide. And so arginine supplementation taken twice a day, and it's really good to have it twice a day, not just one off, right? We want to keep it pulsed during our day. So arginine supplementation increases nitric oxide. It's good for cardiovascular health. So that's a big one. And it's also good for erectile function. That's huge. And maca, again, with using a maca by itself or in combination, can help with sexual function, energy, stamina. We see it in both men and women, great results. And then we want to keep testosterone free. We want to keep it from converting to dihydrotestosterone or estrogen in both men and women, yet again. So something like zinc-rich foods are really important. So I typically will supplement with a zinc supplementation to help with that.
And it was so good to be with you. Thanks so much for taking the time with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Terrific and vital information that we were really happy to share with you. Thanks for tuning in. This concludes episode 8. How smart are you right now? You've had to at least quintupled your knowledge in this area, if not more. I know that's the impact that these interviews have had on me. I'm glad that you're here right now so that your knowledge expands, because think about it, when your knowledge expands, so is your health. We're talking about supplements and natural health. As your knowledge grows here, your health is going to be growing with it. So that's why we're so thrilled to bring this to you. I want to remind you that as we're getting to the end of our free viewing period, our discounting is going to be going away on owning this series. Become a part of the family. Become a part of the Supplements Revealed community, and you will see that you're going to be someone who has the information and the access to information that can change not only your own life, but the lives of others. So that's it for episode 8. Look forward to seeing you in our final episode, episode 9, coming up.
I start taking zinc. I feel great. I see big cognitive improvements. I keep taking that zinc, Now I have zinc excess, and I develop copper deficiency. If you're low in that nutrient, yes, you want to fix that, but you have to be careful that you don't become toxic.
We are, in our day and age, fighting a constant battle in this post-industrial era against everything from toxins and heavy metals to electromagnetic fields and cell phones and Wi-Fi radiation, a constant bombarding with things that cause inflammation or oxidation.
The soil's not as good, the food nutrients are not as good. So almost everybody recognizes that the food supply has less nutrients in it. You're not getting the same levels of magnesium, you're not getting the same levels of vitamin D as you were from 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, our parents and our grandparents. That means that unless you eat a perfect diet, you're not going to get the nutrients you need.